Looks like it's time for me to switch to the Switch 2. Hi! This right here is the Nintendo Switch 2, and I've had this thing for a while, about 2 weeks now, and while it's an excellent console, I wouldn't say it's for everyone, but we'll get into that. So let's start off by talking about the hardware of the Switch, the build quality. The original Switch felt very much like a toy, and even like the OLED Switch, while it did improve on the Switch 1's feel, it's still a bit clunky, especially compared to the Switch 2, which now feels like a very mature, very upgraded handheld. This guy feels like a serious next-gen gaming handheld now. This whole thing is coated in this matte black finish, and it looks really nice, but I'm worried about how it's going to hold up over time, because the matte black on my Switch OLED actually started wearing down, and you can see where my fingers rested, and I've only had this for about a year. But for now, the matte black finish is very nice. It's kind of a soft touch finish. On the back, there's also the upgraded kickstand. The original Nintendo Switch had a really flimsy little stick for a kickstand. This guy is much nicer, much more upgraded. It's much wider now as well, and it supports a bunch of different viewing angles, kind of like the Switch OLED stand. As for the weight, it's honestly not that much heavier compared to the regular Nintendo Switch, although it is a lot bigger. Holding the Switch 2, even my big boy hands find the console to be a bit bulky, and I prefer holding the Switch OLED if I'm like just lying in bed and stuff, because it's much more of a compact console than I find it just rests in my hands nicer. Now, I think the Joy-Cons on the Switch 2 deserve the most improved category. They're a lot larger, the shoulder buttons are a lot bigger too, so that's really awesome if you play with one controller horizontally very often. And overall, the Joy-Con is just easier to hold because of that larger size, and the buttons are comfy as well. Well, they're buttons, not much to say about those. The joysticks, I think they are bigger than the regular Switch 1 Joy-Cons, but they unfortunately still use the same technology as the Switch 1 Joy-Cons, which means we're in for another generation of drift. Also, be careful throwing this into a bag without protection. I actually got a little mark on my right joystick because I chucked it in a bag, and I'm assuming the friction kind of pushed the rubber on the joystick, so there's a little mark on my joystick now, but it gives the Switch a little bit of character, you know? On both Joy-Cons, there's also a new optical sensor, and this is for the Switch 2's new feature called Mouse Mode. Right now, I think Mouse Mode is very underutilized. There's not a lot of games that feature it. There is DragX Drive coming up soon that will be using Mouse Mode, but at the moment, there aren't really any Switch exclusive games that utilize mouse mode, and only time will tell if it's good or gimmick. The magnet system for attaching and detaching the Joy-Cons is super awesome and miles better than the rail system, I think, and they're a lot more fun to play with too. They do wobble a little bit, but it's not something that would affect gameplay or actually using the device. The speakers are improved as well. I think they sound louder and overall a lot clearer, and the 3D spatial audio is pretty neat. Tabletop fans will be happy to hear that there's a new port on the top of the console. It's a USB-C port on the top of the console, and you can use it to charge your Switch while you're playing in tabletop mode, which is really cool. Also, one thing that I haven't really heard people talk about is the new game card slot, which I think is improved because I think it's a bit easier to get open than the original Switch 1's cartridge holder. And as for the screen, there is a plastic thing on top of the actual glass screen, so in case you shatter your screen, the glass doesn't fly everywhere. The plastic is there to hold the glass in, but the plastic cover scratches really easily. Like, even with a week of moderate use, I found some small hairline scratches on the console screen, so I put on a tempered glass screen protector. I can't notice the scratches underneath the screen protector, and got a peace of mind that the screen's protected now. And I will link the screen protector I'm using right here down below in the comments and in the description. Speaking of the screen, the Switch 2 uses an LCD display instead of an OLED display. If you don't know the difference, then this probably isn't relevant to you, but basically in 2021, Nintendo refreshed the Switch 1 with an OLED display, and this allows for deeper, darker blacks, and overall just makes the screen look a bit more vibrant. And in some cases, it can also help save battery life. The Switch 2, however, kind of took a backward step on that and went back to an LCD screen, and while it is nice, it's still an LCD, and at night you can tell that the blacks aren't really truly black. I know I'm being really nitpicky, but at this price, Nintendo should have given us an OLED screen, but it looks like they'll probably save it for a Switch 2 model a few years down the line. The screen itself is pretty excellent though. It's much bigger than the regular Switch and even the Switch OLED, although the bezels do appear kind of thick compared to the Switch OLED. And while it is an LCD, the colors are still very, very vibrant, and 120Hz is also really nice. The screen comes with a 120Hz refresh rate, so you'll be able to see that buttery smooth 120 FPS for the games that support it. And overall, this is a good screen. Like, the average person is not going to care about the difference between OLED and LCD. They're just going to notice that, wow, the screen's bright, it's vibrant, it looks nice. And if you're coming from the original Switch, it's still an upgrade, but it's kind of clear they did this so they could sell an OLED model down the line. As for the UI, we were waiting for a redesign compared to the Switch one, but no, still the same menu, still the same lack of menu music, still the same basic white and basic black themes, and overall the UI is very similar to the Switch one. Me personally, I like the Switch one's UI, and I like that they brought it over to the Switch 2. It feels more familiar, and it was a very no-nonsense way of getting to your games. It was very nice and clean and minimal, although I do wish they did add more themes, and of course menu music. And the cool new software feature that Nintendo's pushing with this generation of console is game chat. It's even got its own little button on the right Joy-Con. And me personally, I don't see anyone using this. Right now, game chat is free, but after a year, they're gonna start charging for it, and I just don't see anyone choosing to pay for game chat when Discord and other apps that let you do the same thing are available for free, and they're available on a bunch of platforms. Now, the battery life is objectively worse. Nintendo didn't even talk about it during the presentation because they knew they might get some backlash. So no matter which Switch model you're coming from, the battery life on the Switch 2 is a bit of a downgrade. I did my own battery test running the exact same game, and the Switch 2 died about an hour before the Switch OLED, so it's a bit disappointing. Now, the Switch 2, of course, is a lot more powerful than the Switch 1, so it's doing a lot more processing and stuff, and it's also got a bigger screen it needs to power. So I'm okay with the trade-off that we're making here with the battery life and the performance, but it still is a bit disappointing. Like, I do wish Nintendo was able to find a way to cram a bigger battery in here. And I do have a feeling Nintendo's gonna do a hardware revision of the Nintendo Switch 2 at some point, because in 2019, for the original Switch 1, Nintendo did a red box revision for the Switch 1, and that made some small modifications to the original Switch, notably battery life. So it's interesting to see if Nintendo does something similar for the Nintendo Switch 2, do like a sort of silent upgrade to it and give it a bit more battery life, do a little more tweaks here and there. Now, as for games and performance, the performance is pretty good. It's got the same level of performance as around like a PS4, PS4 Pro, and the dock actually now comes with a fan built in, so when you dock the console, you're actually going to be able to get better performance than when you're playing in handheld mode. Of course, the console tablet itself still has a fan. You can actually see the vents right over here. The thing is, not many Switch titles are out right now that can take advantage of the Switch 2's improved performance. Fortnite got its own Nintendo Switch 2 version, and it's much improved compared to the original Nintendo Switch, which struggled a lot just loading stuff, and it was just generally a really laggy experience. And on this Switch, it runs almost better than my PC. Like, it's buttery smooth with that 120Hz display, and things load in no problem, and you can now clip things in Fortnite on the Switch 2 now, which you couldn't do on the original Switch. I think it was an issue with the RAM or something, so that's really nice. As for the game library, there's pretty much 2 Nintendo exclusives that you can play on this thing right now: Mario Kart World and Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. Truly a peak gaming experience. Mario Kart World is really fun. It's got much better graphics. I like a lot of the game mechanics, like being able to ride on rails and ride on the walls, but the open world does feel a bit lackluster. And overall, I feel like Mario Kart World isn't the kind of game you can binge like Breath of the Wild. It's more of a party game, you know? You just kind of put it on, get your friends together, and you play Mario Kart World for a couple rounds. At the end of the day, it's a racing game. So right now, basically, not a lot of exclusive Switch 2 games, but if you've never had a Switch before and you get this guy, you'll have almost the entire Switch 1 library of games accessible on this guy, and it'll be a really nice experience. And of course, games designed for the Switch 1 that kind of struggle to run on that hardware, Pokemon, they apparently run pretty decently and stably on the Switch 2. Is stably a word? But now let's talk about some of the problems Nintendo Switch 2 has, at the moment at least. First things first, hardware longevity. The magnet system is great, but we don't know how long these magnets are going to last. Now, this probably isn't a huge concern. I'm sure the people at Nintendo thought about this, and magnets, generally, they don't lose their strength for hundreds of years. But we don't really know the exact type of magnet that Nintendo is using with their console, so I'm not sure if these magnets are going to weaken over time, but hopefully they don't. And also, of course, the Joy-Con drift. It sucks that we have to deal with the drift issue for a whole nother generation of consoles. It's going to be another 7-8 years until the next generation, Nintendo Switch 3 comes out, and we even have a chance of getting rid of the drift issues for good. Also, a lot of controversy around the prices. I think the console price it's okay. It's 700 Canadian dollars with the Mario Kart World bundle, so it's still an eye-watering amount for a game console, but I think for the quality of hardware you're getting, it's not a great price, but it's a reasonable price. The game prices, though, they're a lot more expensive. Like, Mario Kart World is like over $100 in Canada, and I'm a bit worried because this means other companies are going to be like, hey, look what Nintendo's doing, they're raising their prices, let's do that. And Xbox has already updated the prices of some of their hardware and accessories. But then again, some of these issues might also be due to tariffs and the current economical situation of the world. There's also game key cards, which are little physical cartridges that don't actually have the game on them. They're just a little key that you put in your console, and then it lets the console download the game from Nintendo servers. And it looks like some people are assuming that this is the case for every single game, but these are actually just replacing the game download codes from the Switch 1 era, where you'd buy like the little box, and then on the inside there's no cartridge, there was just a little code, you put that in the eShop, and then you get a new game. So I actually think the game key cards are an improvement over the online digital download codes, because these can be reused, they can be sold like a physical game. But ultimately, I think physical game cartridges that don't require the internet at all to open the game are still the best way to go. And there's also some random miscellaneous hardware problems that I'm starting to see on like Reddit. For example, dead pixels, battery corrosion. And this is just the cost of being an early adopter, and also these are just kind of some edge cases. There's no known widespread problems right now with the Switch 2 other than, well, Joy-Con drift. But if you don't want to deal with a chance of your stuff being like all glitchy and unreliable, then I suggest you wait for Nintendo to kind of work things out a bit. So final verdict, if you don't have a Switch, this might be worth picking up because you have that whole Switch 1 library of games you can play. I think it does get a little less straightforward when you already have a Switch though. If you don't care about hardware and you just want to play the new games, I'd say wait, because right now there's not enough Switch 2 exclusive titles to justify getting a whole new console. And if you care a lot about hardware, then it might be better to wait for a Switch 2 OLED or a red box Switch 2 for some improved enhancements like battery life or a better screen. But if you don't care about the current issues that the Switch 2 has, or your OG Switch is dying, or you just really want one and you have the funds to get one, then it's not a bad idea to pick one up. And overall, it's a solid console. It doubles down on what made the Switch 1 so great, and it adds a couple new features and enhancements that might be awesome in the long run. But that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, then please consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching. Be awesome and stay techie. Bye! Holding the Switch 2, 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 even my big boy hands